Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. Welcome back for episode 196 of the Freight 360 podcast. If you are brand new, this is a third episode in a series on prospecting, so make sure to check out the previous two episodes. And if you've been with us for a while, we appreciate all your continued listenership and following and sending us your questions and all that. We got some more good Q&A that came from our Facebook group today at the end of the episode. Continue to share us with all your friends, leave that review, leave comments, subscribe, all the good stuff to help support your boy. So this episode is brought to you by Blue Book Services. Are you looking to quickly identify qualified sales prospects? Looking to develop trusted, sustainable business partnerships? Well, look no further. The Lumber Blue Book is an online directory and credit resource for the lumber and forest products industry, covering mills, manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. Their database of over 23,000 lumber companies can be searched and segmented to develop sales and marketing campaigns. Members receive access to real-time credit and business information for companies throughout the industry. To learn more, go to lumberbluebook.com and click join today. That's lumberbluebook.com. And actually, Ben, we're going to be having Trent from Lumber Blue Book on next week, I believe.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's going to be a good discussion.
How's everything going for you, man?
I got no complaints. Things moving right along. Been prospecting a lot. I told you, picked up a new car last week. I think the NBA finals are over. That's pretty much all that's been new on my end.
I was going to say, on the note of sports, your South Florida is apparently can't win a championship because this week Miami Heat lost and the Florida Panthers lost in the NHL. So,
yeah. It was rough for South Florida, but hey, again, I'm still Pittsburgh loyal. Not that they have a basketball team or a hockey team in the hunt this year, but it's nice to watch the local teams and kind of see everybody with a little bit more energy. My son's home for the summer, so obviously all him and his friends went and watched all the games. I watched a lot of them with him, so which is nice because I've told you this since I've lived here. I don't have a lot of guy friends that I don't, other than playing golf with, right, and spend most of my time with toddlers. So when I have an actual male, it's, an adult to watch sports with, I'm like, boy, I really do miss this about being back in Pittsburgh, was just watching some sporting events with, one of my guy friends or my son in this case.
The other interesting thing in sports is, and again, I'm obviously biased to the Bills, but it made a lot of headlines yesterday or this week. So the Bills had basically a mini camp mandatory type thing for a few days this week. And Stephon Diggs, star, wide receiver number one, just did not show up. And there's all kinds of accusation, or people are like, what was going on? Is it because he's pissed off about stuff from last year and this and that? But who knows? We'll see how it pans out. But it sounds like it's some off the field drama that doesn't necessarily involve football, but it's related to the
playing
team
out
and everything.
Yeah.
So who knows? You never know what's going on inside those guys' head,
No. That's people like everybody else. I think we get so used to watching them perform in this specific literal and proverbial arena that it's like you forget that they're also people and have shit going on in their lives, right? Like they're human beings.
Exactly. Yep. But, well, that's all I got for sports. On a topic of news here, this kind of popped up when I was watching the news this morning, and I looked up an article that talked about it. So the whole thing was trucking companies are having an issue with driver shortages. So I'm going to read this little highlight from an article. It says, America's truck driver shortage is only getting worse. And to address the ongoing issues, one trucking company is thinking outside the box to recruit new drivers by targeting video gamers. Trucking company Schneider National has come up with a new recruiting idea to target a younger demographic, specifically those who play the video game American Truck Simulator. A wildly popular game, more than 2 million copies have sold worldwide. The goal of the game is to realistically simulate the experience of being a truck driver in America. Players take on jobs and then make deliveries across the country, and one real-life trucking company is hoping those in-game skills will translate to the real world. I can't read. Schneider National recently released advertisements within the game so they appear on animated billboards. The virtual ads aim to entice gamers to join the company as real-world truck drivers. That's interesting.
It's really interesting.
I didn't know that there was like a truck driving simulator game.
Neither
I've seen like Farm Simulator. I've seen, you know, obviously like racing games and stuff like that, but I don't play video games at all. I just don't.
Neither do I. It doesn't surprise me that there is a game, and it also doesn't surprise me they're looking at it as an avenue. I read quite a bit related to this. The documents that got released by the younger gamer up in the Northeast, remember it made national news? It was like lots of top secret documents that got released like a month or so ago. They found out the kid was like 21 or 22.
Oh, like the Air Force kid in Massachusetts or whatever?
Yeah, and the context of the story was, you know, he was a gamer and basically was kind of like, you know, increasing his clout in social, I guess, like gaming forums and literally in video game, like, I guess, when you have conversations in games, right?
Yeah.
And was like, hey, you know,
that's basically right. That's right.
And then there was
streaming, you know?
Yeah. And then there was a whole piece that they did on this that said, you know, the military is really leaning into advertising to gamers as well to recruit because, again, similar things. You're playing first-person shooter games, military games. The military is advertising to recruit through similar forums. I'm like, that makes perfect sense. They said the issue, though, is when they changed a lot of the information policies after 9/11 because a lot of departments couldn't communicate, they made it easier for them to communicate. But now so many people have access to the information because it's more readily available amongst them that like lower ranking officials are able to access much greater amounts of classified docs. Anyway, before we go off on a tangent, the whole piece was related to that. And it reminded me of what you were saying in regards to like recruiting gamers for truck drivers.
I'm curious if it like I've seen people that have had crazy like simulator setups. So, like I was in the Army with this dude. We were deployed, and he had with him overseas like a steering wheel and pedal and like all like headset and everything for like a race car simulator. And he was all about it. He like hooked it up to some monitors and stuff. So I wonder if like the truck driving simulators will have like a simulator ELD and like
double clutch,
big steering wheel, the clutch, all of it, man. Yeah. I wonder how detailed they'll get. Cause I mean, I've done like fairly intense simulators for like convoy training in the Army where you actually get inside of like a 2-scale Humvee and there's 360 screen around you and it'll simulate like an ambush on you or just, you know, all kinds of different scenarios. Awesome. You have to react with your whole crew of 4 inside the Humvee or 5 if you got somebody up in the turret. But you could get probably pretty intense with, you know, the truck driving simulators. So we'll see. Hopefully Schneider National can get some drivers out of this.
Well, yeah. Did you see the new Apple product too? That it'll be released Vision later Pro. This year. Yeah. And it's basically the cooler thing about it is that one, it applies the screens to kind of just your world around you. But what's different is you can now still function in the world. You're not just in the virtual. It's more like augmented reality. Yeah. So it sounds, I think there'd be a lot of applications to the things that you're discussing, like with technology like that allow you to do immersive training.
You're a big Apple guy. What do you think about that Vision Pro?
I think it'll be a few iterations before people may use it. I get big question marks, but to be honest, like the use cases from some of the tech blogs I've read, like they're compelling. Like it's like, it is easier than carrying your laptop if you travel. It's better to watch movies or those things if you are traveling. And if they can really figure out the use of it, like it might be easier to actually do your work rather than carrying laptops and all these other things with you and extra monitors. So again, I think it will depend, though, on how it actually feels to just human beings to do this. And that's the question mark is like the Apple Watches, when they came out, everybody said, these are terrible. Who's going to wear this? It's ridiculous. I have my phone. 3 generations later, they become a fad. 4 or 5 generations later, now they're like.
Everyone's got one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if it does get adopted, it'll maybe probably look something similar to that. But I don't know. It all depends on what it's like to actually put it on and use the thing, too. So
yeah. Yeah, I'd have to try it out. I don't like. People thought AirPods were stupid when they came out. They look like you know, a broken toothbrush in your ear. And now, like, you go to the gym or on an airplane or anywhere, everyone's got AirPods.
I would say my most used technology in the past 20 years is AirPods and the ability to like listen to lectures on either podcasts or like, TED Talks and things. It basically made it like anybody can now get like a high level college education for free doing whatever else it is you're doing. And to me, like that has opened up so much just personally being able to, being a parent, right? Being at the park and being able to listen to some of these things while there was just no ability to do any of those things other than carrying around a Walkman with a CD in it, 25 years ago.
I remember the days of the Walkman, the Discman, the mini disc player, be like the first generation of MP3 players, but we'll see, man. We'll see how that all pans out. Let's give a shout out to our friends at DAT and get into it.
Other news I just wanted to add, more positive news on the inflation. 4.9 down to 4% inflation for May, which means I think it's 10 or 11 straight months of decline, which means
I saw Honolulu was only 2%, lowest in the country.
Hey, good news wherever they're lower. I'm happy to hear it because the faster inflation comes down, the faster they're going to be able to stop pulling all the money out of the economy and we can get back to business as usual. So good news for everybody all around, I think, as it relates to the economy. And to DAT, tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT One, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the industry, and you'll get real-time rates on every lane so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. If you have not signed up for DAT yet, please use the show notes. We get credit and you get a free month. If you're adding a seat license, use the link as well. You can get a discount.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to talk more prospecting. Like I said before, the last 2 episodes were on prospecting. We'll just make this a fairly open discussion about it, and we'll talk about kind of what you've been going through and things that I've been seeing lately too. But I do want to kick it off with a consideration when you're prospecting, okay? Because this is something that I ran into this week with one of my agents, and it's credit, okay? You can spend all the time in the world prospecting and building a great relationship just to find out when you're offered loads that customer may or not be credit worthy for your brokerage, and you might have just wasted weeks, right? Or months.
It is. The second one too, that is the 2 most common, credit, and they don't have the load volume you assume they did, was the other one. I remember early on in my career, there was a prospect, I wish I remembered the name, like 2 or 3 months, I really just believed they had this volume. And once I got them into a customer, I found out they shipped like 3 full truckloads a week. And it was just like the biggest letdown ever. I was just like, all of this effort and all this excitement, all for nothing. To your point.
So I guess to kind of bring up those points there, the reason being that's all part of you vetting out a customer to see if they are a good fit for you. Okay. So these are discussions that you should be having earlier on than I think some people do, right? It's not bad to bring up credit or things like that on a second or third phone call. And what you can do is if you have, D&B or a credit reporting website or service that you use, you typically just need their name and address, and you can pull their credit report. And what you want to look at is, you'll see like their days to pay on average, but that could be across all vendors, right? You want to look at specifically like truckload, 3PL, factors, stuff like that, right? Things that are related to the trucking industry and supply chain and logistics. So if you see, like for example, one of the ones we looked at yesterday, the credit team was like, their report looks rough. When looking at it in more detail, we see that there's basically it looks like maybe one invoice that's been 4 months old and it's been on their report for a while. But typically when I see those, if you go talk to a prospect or a shipper, they'll have an explanation for it. It's a disputed load with one specific carrier or one specific broker due to an accident or a claim or service issue, whatever the case might be. But when you uncover that, then you could talk through, what did that carrier or that broker do wrong, or what caused that
it's an
issue,
opportunity.
Right? It's a huge opportunity
to one, have better conversations, ask better questions, to build more rapport, and to learn about the potential hurdle that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. But so I just want to kind of start off with that, but talk us through, what have you been seeing lately with prospecting? Anything that kind of stuck out to you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it. And the difference that for me this year is that I now work for an asset company. So I work with Weller Trucking, primarily in the tanker business. So we do has, non-has, food, feed grade, all liquids on the tanker side. So it's been really interesting for me to learn more about, the specific niche, the equipment that are used, how these commodities move through the economy. And I also work for the brokerage, which means I'm able to see both sides of the fence, right? How receptive are prospects and shippers to either one? What kind of conversations? And I mean, overwhelmingly, it is easier to have a conversation as a motor carrier with assets, right? For a number of reasons that we can kind of maybe even just unpack. But the first and foremost is like just the way shippers are used to talking to motor carriers is that like they're already in their procurement requirements. They're set up.
They have actual trucks.
They have actual trucks. But I would say the biggest overall thing, and I've talked a lot about this for the past week or two with other clients and things, is that like there are habits that just are all around our industry, right? Like we have habits as brokers, carriers have habits, shippers have habits, right? And I would say the one is that shippers are way more inclined or used to talking about lots of their lanes with carriers that have assets. And the reason for that is assets and motor carriers, right, that own trucks, they need predictability, right? We talk about this on the show, like freight brokers, short windows of time, you provide access to the market and flexibility. That's the main value proposition to the industry. Carriers, on the other hand, are the opposite in some ways, where they favor predictable loads because, again, if you own a truck and a driver, like you need time to get the guy to the place and be delivered and empty before he can load at the person you're talking to. So in order for you to even see if any of the lanes are a fit, they're used to answering questions of like, what is the load volume? What days does this load typically, move on? Is it first come, first serve? Is it by appointment? How is the loading dock there? The things that aren't as easy to ask from a freight brokerage standpoint, because again, from the shipper's point of view, they don't have a lot of motivation to tell a freight broker that. They know if they need help, one of the 6 people that prospected them in the past week or so, they can go, hey, can you get me a truck on this? And they will run and go do that in a short amount of time. And motor care just isn't able to even help with that.
Let me ask you this. So, because I mean, as far as assets and brokerage, the company I work for, Pierce, is the same way. We've got a trucking company and we've got a brokerage. Different MCs, but the goal for the asset company is to either haul direct for a customer or take loads from our brokerage, and that way we have visibility, right? But so what some people try to do is they try to sell themselves as an asset-based brokerage when in reality there's kind of a gray area there, because if your intent is to broker out third-party carriers, but you're calling a customer or a prospect and you're advertising yourself as an asset-based company, I think if you're not transparent about the fact that we have a trucking side and a brokerage side, and I'm representing the brokerage side, I think there's maybe some dishonesty that could be an issue there. But my question for you is this. If you approach a prospect, and I know you're in the tanker business, but if you say, hey, Weller Trucking, we have a fleet of tankers, but you say we also have a brokerage. So if we don't have a tanker or a truck available for you, we're going to put it through the brokerage. Are they receptive to that, or is there pushback on the brokerage side of it?
So I would say that right now it is very different. And I agree with the first point. Like, you need to be clear on which side you're representing. And in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons you also need to do that, other than the one you pointed out of just being honest, is the industry is still built on trust. The contracts in our industry are worthless. Like, they're not binding. If you have a contract to pick up a load and you can't pick it up, you don't get sued or nothing bad happens. So trust is the most important thing from the shipper's point of view. So when they don't feel you're being honest at the onset, it doesn't progress past that. You kind of are stopped there. You might talk to them a bunch of times, but they still don't really understand. And if somebody is uncomfortable, think about any listener out there. Think about when you are looking to purchase anything, insurance, a car, a t-shirt. If you're uncomfortable about what you're actually buying and you feel like you don't really understand, you're going to be hesitant to pull a trigger, right? It's just as simple as that. Same thing from a shipper's point of view. So if you aren't clear, it's just making your job harder, even though you feel like you've got a shortcut. It's really not. So you can state that, but I think it's important that you clarify, to your point in the conversation, that you're representing one side or the other and how you operate, because you will get a better response from the person you're speaking to.
Yeah. Now, and I think the point to drive home is that just because you're a broker doesn't mean that you don't have value like a trucking company might. You have value in ways that a trucking company does not have the ability to do. Absolutely. So I think that's what you have to lean in on, right? Yep. And you've got to ask a lot of questions to uncover the needs of your prospect. Have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss? Yes. Have you heard of that one?
Yep.
Really good like way to pose questions that allows somebody to bring their guard down. So if you haven't read that book, definitely check it out. He was like a hostage negotiator, right? But he talked about the psychology.
FBI hostage negotiator, and he wrote a book on negotiating, and it's based on the principles used in life or death scenarios. Great book. There's tons of videos on YouTube too. If you don't want to jump into the whole book, where there's shorter breakdowns, we'll give you some of these techniques that you can use, but is a great book. Absolutely.
The point is there's ways that you can ask questions that, like, if you, like, people are afraid to ask a question a certain way because they're like, oh, it's going to upset my customer. Like, so for example, if the credit issue, right? If there's a bad credit report and I go to my customer or the prospect, like, hey, your credit report looks bad. Like, they might get offended. There's other ways to chalk up that question to bring their guard down and get them talking. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And there was actually, on that same topic, an article I saw earlier this week. I should have bookmarked it, but it was titled, basically how to appear like smarter than you are to your colleagues or your bosses, like in work or in social life, whatever. And the meat of the article basically says that we kind of have it built in psychologically that when people ask good questions, we feel that they are actually smarter, which is ironic because from the other side, most people are scared to ask questions in a prospecting call because they don't want to be perceived as stupid, not up to speed, stupid, unintelligent, not good at their job, that they haven't been in it long enough and experienced. All of these insecurities come up when we want to ask a question. The reality is to your point, if you ask a good question, open-ended, or if it's phrased in a way where you're trying to ask a question that's answerable, right? And again, it's talked a lot about in this book, you're actually gaining trust and you're gaining credibility by asking questions.
Yeah, I think it's empathy, right? That's kind of the thing that he pitched for. And I also saw, this was a few months ago, but he did an interview on Lex Friedman, I think back in like February or March. It was really good. Yeah. And it was, basically a condensed version of the same content, but it's all, and we talk about all the time, building rapport, right? Empathy, very similar concept. The whole thing here is, like we always say, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And how can you do that if you're just robotic and ask scripted questions and you're blunt and you don't have like an art form to the way that you communicate with the other person?
Even more so, right? And I was talking with a client about this yesterday. And then I want to talk a little about openings too, because this was what we were on the call for. Client said, hey, I want to work on different openings. I'm having a hard time getting nervous, picking up the phone, doing more prospecting calls. But the thing I want to point out about what you just said too is, right, every freight brokerage and every carrier and anybody that provides the service that all of them provide in shipping, right, has the ability to get rates, has the ability to find trucks, whether the time frame is on a motor carrier or brokerage, the lane data, the rates, all of those things are readily available, and everybody has pretty much the same services. The differentiator are none of those things. The differentiator is, does the person like working with you, right? Yeah. And anybody out here that is listening that has any customers, right, I guarantee you have at least one or two that, like, you are genuinely, even though you work at different companies and maybe you're thousands of miles apart, are like coworkers, where you talk to them every day. You know their children's names. They know yours. You know their hobbies. Like, my customers, when I started my career, whatever, 8 years ago, I still communicate with, like, their children. Like, one of them recently passed away, but his son reached out to me. Like, that's how well you get to know these people. This is the glue that really holds the businesses together. And these are the values, right? Like, if you look at even a big company like TQO or CH Robinson or any of them, all of these individual relationships with every one of those brokers, with those people, not the company, not the Walmart and the TQO. It's John and Sally that like working together, that holds all that value together. It's the glue across the entire industry.
Yeah. And that's why you see if somebody switches companies, their go-to customers will follow them because they don't care which brokerage they work for. They like that specific person. So, big point to drive home here is that's what you should be thinking about, is not what you're selling, but who you're selling, which is yourself.
Yes.
100%. And I will add on as well, right? Like, yes, every broker can get access to trucks and get rates and all this and that, but it's the actual person that makes them feel a certain way. But also it's that person that uses the ability to find trucks and uses technology and rates effectively to bring them solutions. Because just because you're a licensed broker, you work for a licensed brokerage, does not mean you're going to be good at your job or fun to work with or for. So,
and those are two, right? Like, I think enjoyability. I was thinking about this too this week. It's like it's the enjoyability of the other person being able to work with you, ease of communication, and just honestly being able to kind of like working together, however you define that. And the other one is, I think, willingness to go above and beyond what anybody else is, right? Like, you don't have to be the smartest. You just have to be willing to do one or two more things than the people that you're competing against, right? And in your case, right, maybe it's a few extra phone calls to the carriers to get a better rate rather than getting the first one available. Maybe it's, working your margin down a little bit on this load to help your customer out of this situation. And over the next handful of loads you move, maybe you make up for it. Those are the things that I think really differentiate over time, as well as, and again, I think the third one is asking better questions, right? I had one of our clients too. The manager got on prospecting calls last week and he told me this, and he goes, he's with the sales team and he gets on a call and the first person goes, yeah, hey, look, I don't think we need any help right now. And he says, oh, yeah, that kind of doesn't surprise me, asks a few more questions, and then the conversation goes further. And when he got off, he was kind of telling me, he's like, I know 90% of my sales team wouldn't have asked that second or third question. Like, would have literally just given up when they say, hey, look, we're kind of good right now, give me a call later. That's the other big difference, right? It's also the willingness to kind of push a little bit past your comfort zone in a conversation where you're not irritating somebody, you're not talking over them, you're not bulldozing them, but you don't just give up at the first instance of, not being interested or them just being busy. You're interrupting them. Expect that. That's the thing you're walking into. Don't expect them to like give you a hug and welcome you in the door. They're busy. You interrupted them in a cold call. But again, this is how you interview. Like, this is how we interview for every job that you've ever had, right? You meet a person and you guys see if there's a fit and if you guys share the same values. There's
a level of persistence that is polite that goes a long way. And I mean, you think about it too. And like, think about every story of someone that people got married, right? And they're like, they tell the story of, I pursued her or I pursued him for, 8 different times. They told me no. And finally, it's that persistence though, that if you don't ask extra questions, if you don't follow up, you don't continue the conversation, you're just like everybody else who gave up.
And I was just going to say, right, think about that from the person being pursued standpoint, right? If it's pleasant and it's not irritating, but you're still pursuing them, it's showing them interest, it's showing them care, it's showing them concern. It's literally differentiating you from all the other people they can spend their time with. That's how that plays out, right?
Yeah. So like there's a software vendor that I talked with in the past that was very, very persistent, but not like not overbearing and annoying with follow-up. But the way it made me feel was, if we go with this service or this product, I know we're going to be taken care of.
Yep.
Because they're that persistent and they're that in touch. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I've been personally told by people over the years that they appreciated my persistence and my continued follow-up with them because it made them feel like,
that's how I met you, by the way.
Yeah.
That's how this all came to fruition. You prospected me whatever, the beginning of our career, long, long time ago. But we became friends through those conversations. And we were like, hey, yeah, it's not going to work now. But at some point, I always kind of felt like something will come of this. This is a good relationship to have. And lo and behold, that's literally how this company came to exist.
That's exactly right. So this is a people business, right? It's a relationship business. I mean, there's a set of knowledge and skills that you also need to have to be effective as a freight broker. But it's all about, especially the prospecting phase. It's all about building that rapport and that relationship, so they know what to expect out of you.
So two things, and I want to cover a little bit about openings for people to give them some ammunition and some tips to be able to just do this, because this is where all the friction is in your first call. It's picking up the phone. It's what am I going to say when they answer? We know that everyone's emotional. I mean, I've done this tens of thousands of times. I still get that feeling before I pick up my first call for my dialing times, because it's not a natural thing to do, is to go, hey, for the next hour or two, I'm going to go interrupt a bunch of people and hope that they're going to be receptive to talk to me. We know that. And even if you're not thinking about it in that way, like that's really what that feeling is, right?
Yeah.
The one thing I want to do right before we jump into this is also why, because we get asked this a lot now, is like, well, can we do more marketing? Can I send more blast emails? Especially with AI coming out and the ease to be able to create emails that sound good very fast and send to lots of people at low cost. This is why these aren't as effective in our industry, because everybody can do it. And to the person getting them, there's no personality. It's just choosing amongst all the same things. And there's no real way to determine what is better or worse than the other. It is the people, right? Which is, again, why I do feel like cold calling, even though other people will say there's so many easier ways to do this, like not in a relationship business. You cannot create relationships through texts and emails in the way you can interacting as just a human being. We're not built that way. We've only been doing that for like 30 or 40 years in our entire existence of humanity. It is not built into your DNA to find people you know, like, and trust by reading something they've sent to you. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't know how many times I've had an email that made me feel good versus a good phone call with somebody. So
I can't recall that I've ever read an email that like made me feel emotional about anything in any way, shape, or form.
Oh man. So what? Okay, let's talk openers. Though.
Yes. So I was going through this with a couple of clients, and I was, we would give scripts, and you always kind of laughed at the one that I think is the most used. Like, I've got trucks in your area, which is by far the most common, right?
Or some variation of it, yeah.
Some variation of this, especially from freight brokerages. Hey, and theoretically it's true because you can access the market within 150 miles, and you do have the license to get them that truck in a short period of time, all of which is true. The thing is, like, it's not really different from anything anyone else is saying, so it's not as effective, right? So what I came up with was I started writing down what I was saying that was working, and they all kind of had the same 3 steps. And the steps were, one was a carrot, the second is a takeaway or a pressure release, and the third is extended time frame. And I'll unpack like each one. So carrot, right? And the one I just used, the carrot you're dangling, right, to get their interest is, I have trucks. If you need them and you're interested, let's talk more. But it usually doesn't get to the second step because it sounds like everything else they're hearing. So it usually kind of dies there. So I'll give you one that works on the asset side, but can also be used on the brokerage side. So if you have trucks and you are a motor carrier and you have 2 or 3 drivers, right, and you guys got delivering to a location for your dedicated customers, right, shippers want to know about that. They want to know where your front hauls are so that they can look at back hauls with you. And what that means is it is understood in this conversation that the shipper will get a lower rate for the back haul than for the front haul, because they're going to give you something that you need and don't currently have, which is the other leg of your customer's journey, right? Say I'm in Chicago and my customer delivers to Indianapolis every week and I'm taking spot loads back home. Well, what I get changes, the amount of time it loads, the commodities, the weight, if I've got detention, all of these things are risks when you go to the spot market for a motor carrier. So to reduce those risks, the shipper understands, hey, you're getting a market rate to come out here. Give me a little bit of a discount. I'll get you back home. And for that discount, I'll give you dedicated volume is the unsaid thing, right? Shipper's like, hey, if you give me a little bit better than market, yeah, I get something like maybe a 5% discount over what I'm paying in the spot market, but you're also going to get something in return, meaning I don't ever have to worry about giving this to another carrier. I'll just auto tender it to you. And in return for that little bit of a discount, you never have to go to the spot market. You don't got to pay a dispatching service. You don't have to worry about the types of loads, the dwell time, any of the things we talked about.
You don't have to deadhead 100 miles to get a load to take you back home, which is why the discount's worth it for you. All of that.
Correct. Now, why that doesn't work all the time from the carrier's point of view is I think because carriers view driving their truck much more like skilled laborers view that job. They don't view it as a commodity. They take pride in their work and should, right? And I was thinking about this because like my dad was a commercial painter in construction and I grew up with those guys that have done that for 10 and 20 years. They will not work for less than what they feel their wage is because they take it as a slight to their skill set or them as a person. And I think that is very true with truck drivers as well. There's pride there. And that's why there's so much visceral anger when the market is below what they believe they're worth. And rightfully so, right? Not discounting any of those things. So that doesn't always play out between the shipper and the carrier. But it can also happen with the brokerage, right? Because the brokerage, and this is the value really that good brokers provide is, if you are talking to your carriers, you should be able to make the case we just made as to why the carriers that you work with should be willing to run a little less for a load they can rely on every week that doesn't involve everything you just pointed out, right? Yep. And that's really what good brokers can do to find capacity where it doesn't appear there is any capacity. I'm looking at it, seems like they want to pay the same thing. How do I make money? This is really an instance on how you can actually execute this too, right? So the carrot that you can use is if you're a carrier, like literally saying like, hey, I'm in your area a couple of days a week. My drivers are, wanting to see if we can talk about some of your backhaul lanes. If you're a broker, you can say the same thing. Like, hey, some of the carriers I work with every week and have for years, they're my most trusted guys. They're delivering either to your facility or into your zip code. And they've asked me to give you a ring on their behalf to see if maybe you got some backhauls that we can book for them. And as a broker, it works very well because you're not calling about yourself. You're doing something on behalf of another person, which appears as what? Because it is. I'm genuinely caring about another human being. I'm calling you to help them. I'm just here to basically facilitate and help you, help them, and both of you guys work out great. So that's why this carrot allows their guards to come down a little bit and open you up to the next kind of step.
So let me say something about the whole trucks in the area thing, right? Because if you're brand new in the industry, it's very likely that you are going to be instructed to, or you will just default to saying that you have trucks in the area, right? What you will find over time is that as you get more skilled and you find your voice on the phone, you will be able to communicate that same concept without saying, yes, I have trucks in the area, right? And you just kind of outlined that.
Yes.
And so I think when I kind of rag on that, it's just because I've heard it so many times. And you kind of find a way to get your message across, but in your own unique way that doesn't sound to the prospect like you're every other person.
Spot on. So the client I was working with yesterday, right, speaks English as a second language. And her concern was like, how do I sound? And I said, here's exactly how I learned mine was I would sit next to the people that were the best at this in the office. I would write down what they said. I would deliver it for a day or two verbatim the way they did. And as I did it dozens of times every day, to your point, you find the words that explain it from your own vocabulary better. And then it becomes your own. It literally will transform as you're executing it from someone else's to your own words that sound more genuine to you. Absolutely.
It's the same thing. Like I think about it with like my kids, right? My kids are starting to talk and they say things that they hear a lot. Like whether it's my wife or myself or their grandparents. Like one of the things that's hilarious is my son Jackson, he's 3. And I used to always joke with him whenever something would break. I was like, Daddy can fix anything. So like a toy will break and he'll go,
Daddy can fix
Mama, it's broken. Daddy will fix anything. When he's heard me say it so many times. Now he'll say it. So we say things that we hear from our parents when we're kids. But like you just said, when you're learning a sales job or brokerage, listen to the people around you that are good at it and pick up on not just what you like about it, but also what you didn't like. If you heard something that was like, ugh, that kind of made me cringe, well, likely it's going to make the prospect cringe too. So maybe take that out of your approach. But again,
100%.
repetition, it'll come so natural to you.
Now, second is it's called a pressure release or a takeaway or going for no. But basically, the premise is as I start to get closer to asking you for something, tension builds up, right? If I start talking about, hey, I got trucks in your area, wanted to see what lanes maybe you're shipping. I know we ship for some of your other customers. As I'm saying those things, you can almost feel like I'm about to ask something of you. Like, can you give me your lanes, right? So there's like pressure kind of building up. And the easiest way to reduce or alleviate that pressure is one of two ways. My personal verbiage is, look, hey, I know I'm calling you on behalf of a couple of my drivers, but to be honest, I don't even know if it'd be a fit between the two of you guys, between your company and them. I think it's worth maybe a conversation. But again, Nate, like I said, I don't even know if it would be a fit, but I thought it was worth a call. So just by saying, I don't know, and I'm basically saying it's okay to say no to me as well, which is another way of saying this. Hey, look, if at any point in time in the conversation, you don't think there's a fit, feel free to please just tell me no. Either of which alleviates the tension and makes you feel more comfortable because it doesn't feel like... It
makes them feel in control too, instead of being like a
You're giving them control. Yep, exactly. You're not going to leverage up all the guilt and all this because that's why people don't like... That's why we have the name of like sleazy salesman, car salesman in the 70s, right? Like that cheesy stockbroker 80s. I'm just going to pound on you and beat your objections to the ground until you say yes because you can't. And again, this is the easiest way to alleviate this. So come up with something that is your value add, right? We gave you a couple. That's what you should lead with because if you're going to interrupt someone's day, the first thing they're wondering is, why should I keep talking to this person? So have something prepared. The second thing is after you're explaining this, say, hey, look, either I don't know if we'd be a good fit, but I thought it's worth a call. Hey, if at any point in time you don't feel like it's a fit, feel free to just tell me, no harm, no foul. Either of which alleviates the pressure, your guard comes down. Third is, and I notice I always do this, is I will use a far away time or a time behind us to ask the questions I want. So if I asked you as a shipper, can you tell me about your lanes today or this week? Again, you feel like I'm talking or about to try to ask you for something right now. The tension will build up, right? Mm-hmm. But again, if I ask the same question about a quarter or two in the future or last year, you can answer that question without feeling like I'm trying to ask for something right now. So it might sound something like, hey, look, again, Nate, like I said, I don't know if it'd be a good fit or not, but hey, let me ask you, do you have any of those lanes that you ran even last year? And again, like I said, I know you might not even be running them now or might not even be for another quarter, third or fourth quarter this year. But, if we looked at last year, would that have been a good fit for you? Because you kind of, at least in hindsight, know what happened last year. Does that seem like something that would have been of value to you then? Now, people have no qualms usually talking about their last year's business. It's already happened. Right. I don't feel like you're trying to get anything or sell me anything. And I'm more inclined to tell you about it, which to be honest is all you really need to happen in the first conversation. They know there's something you can kind of provide. You're not going to be high pressure. They're going to build a little rapport there. You talk a little bit about how maybe that might have been a fit this year or last year. And again, I'll either ask for third or fourth quarter this year or last year because that keeps their guard where it is. And then hopefully I can talk a little bit about their business. My place where I go after that is usually to just talk about overall business and the economy because I just like to talk about it. But for anybody else, you can talk about anything at that point. Talk about their hobbies. Hey, if it's a Monday, I always kind of ask like, hey, it's out of curiosity. How was your weekend? How are things going there? Like it's the general shit that you ask people when you're like at a job that seems like small talk that doesn't amount to anything. That's why we do it in person, is to build rapport with people we don't know that well.
Also, when you're having that small talk, I know we're getting a little long here, and we could probably do an entire episode on what I'm about to say here, is that small talk, you can usually uncover some of the pain points or irregularities that you can then pounce on. Because here's the deal. They can tell you all day long that things are great. They don't need any help. No one's running a perfect operation. If they were running a perfect operation, they would not need, the amount of people that work there, right? We're humans, things are imperfect. And, if you're such a stud at running your department, you probably got promoted to run something else. So there's going to be issues. You have to try and uncover what they are because they're not just going to blatantly tell you. If you're like, hey, John, this is Nate over at ABC Logistics. Oh, hey, Nate, here's the 3 things that I'm pissed off about today you can help me with. It doesn't happen that way, but you have.
And I'll give you another one. even if you guys worked in this, and this happened at TQL, like we worked in the same building as some of the shippers. And you would see people like literally walking out to their cars and they just didn't know the other person. Like, oh, hey, I see you worked at Chewy, was one of the other companies, the dog toy food place, right?
Yeah.
And people would just be like literally walking to somebody like, oh, hey, I see you work at Chewy. Hey, I'm in transportation. What are the issues you've been running into? And I would sit there and kind of laugh. And the next day when it'd be in the office, I'm like, okay, let me ask you something. If you worked at a company that sold a product and somebody else was walking to their car and you've never met them, never seen them, don't know anything about them, and they just out of the blue asked you basically what you weren't good at your job, how would that make you feel? Does it make you want to go have a beer with them or have lunch with them? Or does it make you want to run to your car as fast as possible or pretend you're getting a phone call to just avoid the situation as much as humanly possible? Because that is a real life example of how this plays out in prospecting. Like, I don't know this guy. I'm going to interrupt him in the middle of the day and ask him why he's bad at his job. What have you been screwing up with lately? Who are the terrible carriers you put on your loads that don't show up? Tell me about these people, right?
A much better way is if you hop on the phone, let's say it's a Monday, right? Or it's any point in time where there might have been a meeting recently. So it could have been a Monday morning meeting, an end of the month meeting, and you talk to your prospect like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, just, had a meeting, getting the beat down from the boss upstairs. Pry into that. What is it?
Yes.
Is it involving transportation, service, rates, right?
Commiserate.
They just gave you a little bit of a nugget. Grab it.
People love to vent about their problems once they can trust you, but they will not until they do. So do not ask about them until you've got enough rapport that you would feel comfortable complaining about your boss to them. If you don't feel like you've got that rapport to tell them that, they don't have it for you either, right? Exactly. Which is why, and we don't need to talk about this as the episode, but it's like listening is probably more important than talking, because this is how you determine whether or not the person is engaged in the conversation. Yeah. And whether or not you feel like you could talk to them about these things.
Exactly. Well, we started to open up a can of worms there. We'll continue the prospecting series. It's good. It's good discussion. It won't be next week, but probably the following week we'll get more into it. All right. So we got Q&A here, but first a shout out to our friends over at Lean. Are you looking to take your freight brokerage or agency to the next level? Look no further than Lean Solutions Group. They are industry leaders in nearshore staffing with offices located in South America, Mexico, and the Philippines. They offer a wide range of positions, including back office operations, accounting, tech and web development, business development, marketing, customer service, and more. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with the best in the business. Visit their website at leangroup.com to learn more. That's LEAN group.com. All right. You want to read off the first question here and we'll get into it? These are, by the way, the first two are from either a driver or just a carrier in general.
Yeah. Why are brokers asking to see my truck's registration or picture at pickup?
Okay. Good one. So I think specifically the guy was asked for his VIN number. This opens up an interesting discussion here. Because of a lot of the fraudulent activity lately, a lot of brokers have been requesting to see a picture of the driver at the pickup with the MC on the side of the truck or whatever. It's to verify that they are who they say they are, right? It's not double brokered. It's not a quote unquote leased on owner operator who has a different MC number who's not on their insurance.
Yeah.
Don't mind my dog there. Hang on, let me pause this. All right, so there's a lot of reasons why somebody might ask for the picture, MC on the side of the truck, registration, all that, right? Fraudulent activity, you want to make sure they're not a double broker, make sure they are who they say they are. A lot of times recently, we'll say like, hey, we need a picture of the side of the truck at the pickup with the MC. And they're like, well, it's going to be a different MC number because he's a leased on owner operator. Well, if he's a leased on owner operator representing your MC, he or she should have your MC like a magnet that slaps on the side of the truck that shows, right? But they'll say this, they're actually double brokering it. Yep. Because if they lease on this person, their insurance will then be affected by it. So this is why it's happening more recently. Same thing with like fuel advances. If it's a new carrier, I usually ask, registration, cab card, sign BOL, stuff like that, right?
There's just shippers that ask this too. I know as a broker, like I've had customers that they wanted to know truck trailer numbers at MCs and sometimes the color type at the shipper. And we would send them over in emails. And I'm sure they didn't check every one, but as a matter of policy, they did this for the same reasons, to make sure they didn't get caught up in double brokering, pay a broker that paid someone else. And they're really trying to help prevent the fraud we've been talking about all year. I mean, to be honest. So
again, there's multiple ways to communicate this as a broker. Like we talked about in the prospecting, right? There's multiple ways to basically make your statement. So when I was talking to a guy about this last week, and there's a carrier that he like thought there was an issue, like he thought it might be a little sketchy. Is a Sprinter van, like an expedite company with Sprinter vans, and he's like, man, they have no inspection history. I'm like, they're Sprinter vans. They're not going to roadside inspections. They're going to get inspected if they break down and a trooper pulls over and finds out they're a motor carrier. Like they're not going to have a ton of inspections like you would see a regular Class 8 type of truck company would. So anyway, he's like, well, I want to do some diligence here. And I'm like, all right, well, like we'll do the usual, like GPS, verify MCN side of the truck at pickup. Don't give them the full address until you verify. He's like, well, I'm going to sound like a real a-hole if I ask for all this. And I'm like, no, you can craft it in a way that sounds like very low, like low stress. Like, hey, obviously, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the industry lately. So our company, right, not me, but our company has created a new policy that we're trying to make sure that we're taking care of all of our good carriers properly and trying to get rid of the bad actors in our network. So we're going through just the first couple of times, want to verify X, Y, and Z. And obviously I know, you're not one of the bad actors, but really appreciate doing business with you. And this is, you kind of see where I'm going there, right? I'm not being like, hey, I need this, and this. Otherwise I'm not giving you
it's also not between you and them, right? You've deferred. Like, hey, it's the company's policy. I get it. It's a pain in the ass for me too. But hey, after we do it a couple of times, we're not going to have to be this stringent. And again, this also protects both of us and our customer, is what it is, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Next one's good.
Yeah. This is a carrier. Go ahead and read it off.
Should I disclose having a box truck right away or wait until I get more info from the broker?
So I'm assuming they're asking this because they don't have a 53 foot, but they're assuming it might be a smaller load and they could throw it in a box truck.
Yes.
I'll let you give your opinion. My first one is I'm all about transparency. If I find out someone kind of deceived me, it's going to leave a bad taste in my mouth.
Yes.
What you may want to ask is like, hey, could this go on a box truck?
Yes.
Does this need to be on, a flatbed, or does it need to be on a full dry van, right? That's how you would probably want to ask. What do you think?
Yeah, I do the same. And I think as a broker, you should be doing the same thing to the shipper and ask if you've got smaller loads. Always look for opportunities to widen your ability to get capacity. The wider your options, the more likely you are to have a better of a margin or to even pay a little bit less. So one, if you're a broker, you should always ask if it's a small or a partial load. Hey, do you got any issues with us loading a box truck? And I think if you're a carrier, you should say that up front is, hey, I was calling about this load. I saw you posted out of curiosity. In fact, you could do it in a way that isn't deceptive and doesn't give it away. You could phrase it as like, hey, saw this lane posted up, saw this load. Hey, what are the equipment requirements on this? Ask that as an open-ended question. And if they come back and say, hey, 53 or 48, then ask for clarification. Hey, out of curiosity, could your shipper or receiver take a box truck for this one? And then I think you can kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. But I think the key point here is to not come across as deceptive or like you're hiding something.
Yep.
I've seen it too many times where somebody, like, you could tell they're going to try. It's a smaller load, and they don't tell you that they're going to do it as a partial and throw something else on there, but you can tell they're doing that. And then your stuff shows up late or it gets moved around and damaged. So yeah. Better to be upfront.
Well, I will add this to that point. If you do have a small load right now, realize that carriers are doing everything they can, not to deceive you, but to make enough money to pay their bills. So if your customer is paying you for a dedicated option, make sure you clarify that to the carrier. Like, hey, if we're negotiating a rate, I need you to know that even though this is a 12-foot, 10,000-pound load, I'm paying you for dedicated. I can't have this cargo stopping anywhere along the way. The shipper really wants visibility and needs it to go from point A to point B. That's what they're paying me for. That's what I need to make sure I'm paying you for.
Yep.
Like, be specific and be direct about it.
Exactly. All right. Lastly, for a broker, what factoring company would you recommend to use? I'm just starting. So if you go to our website, you'll see there's a link on our affiliate section for HaulPay. HaulPay, we recently partnered with them, I want to say earlier this year, probably the most cost-effective that I've seen for a new broker.
Yes.
Definitely.
And they're really easy to deal with. In fact, again, the brokerage I'm with and a few of our clients, I was talking with Sarah over there and connecting them with a few referrals in the past week or so. And I've heard nothing but great things from everybody we've sent their way. So yeah, great product, great people to work with there. And I think below market rates compared to the other ones we've looked at.
Very
for
much.
Newer brokers.
Yeah.
If you're larger and you're doing more than 50 or 60K a month, I would look at HaulPay. But I would also maybe look at Triumph as well and compare pricing, because when you're at those numbers, percentage points matter a lot to your bottom line. So,
yep, exactly.
Yep.
Well, good stuff. Good episode. Don't forget to take the survey. It's in the show notes. It was in our newsletter the last 2 weeks. Chance to win $1,000. And I think they're drawing multiple winners. Did I see that? I was on there. Let me look it up. Yeah. I want to make sure I'm not crazy. I was on the survey page yesterday, and I thought I saw they did a revision. A chance to win a $1,000 gift card, 3 to be given away.
Nice.
And if you agree to the lengthier survey, you get an additional 2 entries into the drawing. So the survey takes about 5 minutes. Go ahead and use the link in the show notes or description on YouTube or in our newsletter or wherever you found it. So It's actually surveymonkey.com/r/broker360. Cool, man. We're going to talk lumber next week, right?
Yeah, looking forward to it. The other thing, too, we don't talk enough about it in the show, at least from our marketing teams, is that we also do have a freight brokerage course. If you want to get into freight brokerage, it's Freight Broker Basics. There's a link in the show notes or in the comments. You can also find it on our website, freight360.net.
Absolutely. Well, good stuff. Any final thoughts here, Ben?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.